of the corner of her eye. A writer for the daily tabloid newspaper, I Spy, Van Derben was standing slightly apart from the crowd, wearing a self-congratulatory smirk and giving instructions to the photographer accompanying him. It was Van Derben who had uncovered and then gleefully disclosed that the writer T.J. David, whose first book was generating buzz in book circles as well as in Hollywood, was, in fact, Bellamy Price, an attractive, 30-year-old woman. Why this native Texan, blue-eyed, long-legged, and voluptuous, and isn't that how we like them, would want to hide behind an innocuous pen name, this reporter doesn't know. But in spite of the author's coy secrecy, Low Pressure has soared to the top of the bestseller charts, and now, apparently, Ms. Price has come out of hiding and gotten into the spirit of the thing. She's eschewed her spurs and hat, abandoned the Lone Star State, and is now residing in a penthouse apartment overlooking Central Park on the Upper West Side, basking in the glow of her sudden celebrity. Most of that was a lie, having only filaments of truth that kept it from being libelous. Bellamy did have blue eyes, but she was of average height, not noticeably tall as his description suggested. By no one's standards could she be considered voluptuous. She did have a cowboy hat, but it hadn't been on her head for years. She'd never owned a pair of spurs, nor had she ever known anyone who did. She hadn't abandoned her home state in the sense Van Derben had implied, but she had relocated to New York several years ago, long before the publication of her book. She did live on the Upper West Side across from the park, but not in a penthouse. But the most egregious inaccuracy was Van Derben's claim that she was enjoying her celebrity, which she considered more a harsh glare than a glow. That glare had intensified when Van Derben wrote a follow-up, front-page article that contained another startling revelation. Although published as a novel, Low Pressure was actually a fictionalized account of a true story. Her true story. Her family's tragic true story. With the velocity of a rocket, that disclosure had thrust her into another dimension of fame. She abhorred it. She hadn't written Low Pressure to become rich and famous. Writing it had been therapeutic. Admittedly, she'd hoped it would be published, widely read, and well received by readers and critics. But she had published it under a non-gender specific pseudonym in order to avoid the spotlight in which she now found herself. Low Pressure had been eagerly anticipated even before it went on sale. Believing strongly in its potential, the publishing house had put money behind its publication, placing transit ads in major cities and print ads in magazines, newspapers, and on the internet. Social media outlets had been abuzz for months in advance of its on-sale date. Every review had been a rave. T.J. David was being compared to the best crime writers, fiction and nonfiction. Bellamy had enjoyed the book's success from behind the protective pseudonym. But once Rocky Van Derben had let the genie out of the bottle, there was no putting it back. She figured her publisher and Dexter and anyone else who stood to profit from sales were secretly overjoyed that her identity and the backstory of her book had been exposed. Now they had not only a book to promote, but also an individual whom they had deemed a publicist's dream. They described her as attractive, well-educated, well-spoken, not so young as to be giddy, not so old as to be boring, an heiress turned best-selling author. She had a lot of hooks to draw upon, the chief one being that she had desired anonymity. Her attempt to hide behind a pen name had, instead, made her all the more intriguing. Rocky Van Derben was relishing the media frenzy surrounding her, which he had helped create, and, never satisfied, continued to feed the public's voracious curiosity with daily tidbits about her, most of which were either blatantly untrue, speculative, or grossly exaggerated. As she continued to sign autographs and pose for photographs with fans, she pretended not to have noticed him, but to no avail. He rudely elbowed his way through the crowd toward her. Noticing his approach, Dexter cautioned her in a whisper, "Don't let him get to you. People are watching. He'd love nothing better than to goad you into saying something he could print out of context." When the so-called journal